LeaderCast.
This week on the Deep Leadership Podcast.
Build a business plan very quickly and then get into the market and start testing it.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today. It's another beautiful day here in North Carolina, and I'm enjoying a hot cup of whiskey barrel-aged coffee from my friends at the Salty Sailor Coffee Company. Their whiskey barrel-aged coffee is my new favorite, probably because they age the coffee beans for 30 days in whiskey barrels and create an amazing flavor. Salty Sailor is a veteran-owned coffee brand and is the official coffee of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Listeners get 10% off their amazing selection of fresh roasted coffee by going to saltysailorcoffee.com and entering the code DEEP at checkout. Today's episode is also brought to you by our other sponsors, Leader Connect, Ignite Management Services, and Liberty Strength. All these sponsors help me bring these shows to you each and every week, so I highly encourage you to click on their links below and check them out. Now, in this episode of the Deep Leadership Podcast, I'm joined by Brandon White, who shares insights on building better and more effective business plans. Brandon's latest book, Back of the Napkin to Business Plan in 11 Slides, offers a practical guide to creating a business plan quickly and efficiently. We sat down and talked about the misconceptions of business plans, the importance of simplicity in planning, and the value of testing ideas in the market. Business planning is essential to leadership in all areas of a business's life cycle, so you need to understand these important concepts. Now, this was an enlightening conversation with tons of practical advice that I know you'll enjoy. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Brandon White. Brandon is an entrepreneur with 2 exits so far and lots of strikeouts. He's an author, podcaster, angel investor, former venture capitalist, and one time worked in marketing at America Online. In 1996, he founded Worldwide Angler Inc., which was recognized as the #1 social networking and e-commerce site for sport fishermen on the internet. His latest book is called Back of the Napkin to Business Plan in 11 Slides. How to write a business plan on a flight from San Francisco to New York. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn more about building a business plan that helps you make better business decisions. So Brandon, welcome to the show.
John, thanks so much for having me and that wonderful introduction that I listened to and makes me sound like I've done so many things.
Well, you have. Yeah, absolutely. So you've been in the trenches. And I think that's part of the reason I wanted to have you on the show is because you're not talking about theory, you're talking about real life, and you've been doing it for years. So as a successful CEO, entrepreneur, investor, someone who started companies, successful companies, what are some misconceptions about the idea of a business plan?
Well, I think people think that the business plan in business school, I think they still teach, if they teach you a business plan or they teach it anywhere, that's this long form type of thing. And the idea, John, that this has to be a long, drawn-out process. And that's just not the way in my world that it's evolved. You should be able to get your idea down on paper in a format that makes sense and test the general idea on, that was my byline. So easy, you can do it on a flight from San Francisco to New York. I mean, in 5 hours, depending on the jet stream, give or take. You should be able to read the book and do a business plan. My first business plan that I did, it took me weeks to read the book. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I think it was 9-point font. I bought the book in Annapolis, Maryland with my now wife. And it just was so long. And I said, this is just crazy that it would take you that long to read the book and then figure out how to write the plan after you've read something and trying to understand what they mean. So your business plan does not have to be long. You really can do it in 11 slides. You should do it quickly, and you should actually get to work really fast.
So why do we think that? Why is there this perception that we have to have a long, drawn out business plan? Is it because that some maybe in the past that was something that was important, or do we? Is it just that people are trying to sell books and trying to sell methods and complicated ways to do things?
I think people were trying to sell books, degrees, and other things in academia. I mean, that's really how it was taught a long time ago. Was you write this 50-page business plan, which I did write, and I think that what happens is you wind up spending months, possibly, writing a business plan when, as soon as you're done the business plan and you actually start executing on it, everything changes. Not everything, I'm exaggerating. But things change. I mean, you know this, you run 9 businesses, and I mean, you can have a plan and it's a great plan, and as soon as it meets the market, like 10 things are wrong. So I also think Silicon Valley and funding startups sort of changed that in the sense that, one, most investors don't have a long attention span. And quite candidly, that's just the truth with any consumer in the world. Like, if you don't have an elevator pitch, or you don't have the hook, or you can't explain your idea really quickly, humans just aren't going to listen to it. I mean, not even in the modern day. So I think it's a combination of things that really brought that up, and no one really challenging the status quo at the time. It was more of accepted, here's what you do. And sometimes until someone steps up, and I don't know when that moment happened, but it definitely happened over the last, I would say over the last 10 years or 15 years is when it started to change.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. And to your point, when we started our company 8 years ago, I remember talking with my early employees, and we said, one of the things I said to them is, we have no idea what this business will look like 10 years from now. And the truth is, it doesn't look like what we originally planned. And we have found our niches that were very successful. And so we focused on exploiting those in the marketplace. And so that's what we're good at. That's what we're known for. And that's where the money is. So that's what we're doing. And it's not the big overall overarching company we thought it would be. It is a very specific, very, focused organization that's focused on a particular opportunity that the big companies have missed out on. So yeah, I think you're right. To your point, you don't really know what your company's going to look like at the end of the day,
No, I think if someone were to ask me, like, out of the 11 things in a business plan, what ultimately is the most important, or if someone said, oh, I'm just going to be lazy and I'm only going to do one of those slides, I think you should do the financials. I think people, and that's the slide, or that's not even a slide, it winds up being a slide, but it starts in a spreadsheet. That's what everybody avoids. And my main point is, I think too many people go into their ideas with the idea, the passion, and this view of a market, and they believe they have the math in their head. And until you see your profit and loss, and really more importantly, your cash flow statement, like, my main thing is, let's figure out if we can make money at all. Or if you see that, there's going to be 100 variables. We all know that. But if there's a 5% margin in this business, are you willing to spend the next, let's be realistic. It probably takes 5 to 7 years to figure out a business, like, to really figure it out. Are you going to dedicate that part of your life to do that? And is 5% enough? Or are you going to be able to sell enough of these widgets, whatever that is, or hours if you're a service company, to be able to make that a meaningful number, versus with that much risk that you're taking, versus just going to work for someone else?
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for sure. Yeah. Well, one of the things you say, and I thought it was interesting, you say that a business plan is not just for aspiring entrepreneurs, that it can be used in other purposes. So where else can we use this concept of a business plan, these 11 slides? Where else could we use this in our say, existing businesses that we run?
Well, I don't know about everybody or your process, but in most of the businesses that I've run, all of them, we always do a shutdown at the end of the year. And that shutdown is a look back on what happened, and it's an opportunity over that period, usually several days, to decide what the goals are, very specific goals for the coming year. That's effectively a business plan. I mean, if you're launching a new product or a new service or whatever that is, that's a business plan. I mean, you're going to, if you're a bigger company, you can trust that the finance department and the CFO is going to be involved in understanding if they're going to allocate that money or whatever it is, or if you're a small business owner, are you going to invest that money into this new product line or whatever the idea is? And that's really the business plan. And you should be able to come up and use the business plan as sort of the guiding principle so that everybody is on the same page. I mean, your whole podcast is on leadership. Like, leadership is part of it is, I think, is clear communication with your team so everybody understands where that we're all going. And if everybody has the business plan and everybody can pitch the business plan,
Yes.
then now you're all rowing, the same way. I also think it's not just about, you could be an aspiring entrepreneur within an existing company. When I worked at America Online, which dates me probably a little bit, we had premium services. And one of my jobs there was I was on a team where we would build quote unquote miniature businesses adjacent to and under the AOL brand. What people probably don't understand, for those who were around for AOL, is AOL really had multiple business lines. I mean, we did an antivirus product and it wasn't a very big team of us. And that product, went from $0 to $90 million in 12 months. And the reason it did that was because we had a business plan and we needed that business plan to pitch senior leadership to get them to invest. So a business plan, I think, to what you brought up, is it gets put out there as that's just for entrepreneurs or somebody with an idea. Well, people with ideas exist all along the way, and your existing business that you've had for whatever, 5, 10, or 15 years, you're going to have a business plan. You said your business changed. So somewhere in the middle there, you built a new business plan, whether you were led there or not, right? There was an opportunity at some point that you saw things change.
Yeah, and one thing I like about what you just said was the idea that, not only do you have to assess your business and say what direction are we going to head, but you create this plan. But you said everyone needs to understand the plan, and that's the thing that I think is missing a lot of times when I at least in my corporate days, spending time with managers, is that people didn't know what the mission was. They didn't know what the goals were. They couldn't pitch the business and where it was headed, right? Because, and I often say that if you spend a lot of time developing a plan, you should spend twice that getting people on board, right? Because without people, we don't get our plans done, right? So a big part of creating a business plan is being able to get people to be able to communicate it or understand it, right? Or apply the principles. But if we make it so complex, right, that if it's not 11 slides, for example, and it's really complex, people aren't going to understand it. So we need to boil it down to the simple message that people understand it. That's why I like what you're doing, is you're boiling it down to here's what's really important.
Yeah, and simple, as you know, John, is really hard. But one of the things that stuck with me about what you just said, which I think is important, I had a guy back when I was a venture capitalist in Northern Virginia. He was giving a talk, and he was the CEO of one of the big resume companies, and I forget which one it is right now. It's escaping me, but he sold his company to Monster, who I think may exist now or not. But one of the things he said, which has always stuck through me, oddly enough, like I don't know about you, John, but you go to school and you get all these advanced degrees and all these things, and then it's like these little nuggets that are just priceless that stay with you. But he said, our goal in our company was that anyone could pick up a customer service call and or a PR call and give the elevator pitch, period. And anyone listening right now, like, honestly think, can everybody in your organization, if someone called and said, this is XYZ Press, I'm doing an article, and there was no one else available, could you give the elevator pitch?
Yeah.
And if you can't, I would suggest that there might be some tuning up that you need to do. because everyone, all the way down to the lowest position in the company, in my mind, should be able to give the elevator pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, if you want to achieve your purpose, everyone has to understand your purpose and your direction. So, and I think that the days of when just the CEO knew the plan and everyone else just executed what they're told, those days are over. we need everyone to bring their brains to work in the environments that we operate today. So everyone needs to be on board with the plan. So I really like that idea. I like the concept. I like the idea of simplifying. There's, like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of books about, writing business plans, starting your business, these sort of things. What makes your book different? What did you focus on in your book?
Well, the first thing is that traditionally business books aim to be 60,000 words.
True.
I mean, that is the idea, right? If you can get there. My goal was to make my book as short as humanly possible.
I love it.
And the book came in at under 22,000 words. So you can read the book on a flight from San Francisco to New York, and you can actually do work. Now, a few things you're going to have to do, like, let's be realistic. Building financial plan could take you 5 hours. It could take you 10 hours, depending. I mean, because you're going to go through all sorts of stuff in your financial plan. But you could do you could get from the back of the napkin into some sort of format on your business plan. And my goal was to make it readable, consumable, and easy.
I love that. We've had Ken Blanchard on the show, and, Ken has written tons of leadership books and very, very successful at what he does. But one of the things that he said is he writes his books short so that people will not only read them, but actually implement the ideas in the book. That's why he doesn't write long books. He writes short books for people to read and implement the ideas. And I love that. I love the concept. I know my first book is shorter, and that's the one that's most popular because people are busy, right? And they want to get the most out of this piece of material. And I think those days of maybe, writing the 60,000 word books, I don't know, people may not be into those now. Of course, we have Audible and they can listen to it on, while they're driving around. But I think more concise and focused is the way to go if you want people to read and implement.
Yeah. I mean, my real question, John, is how come we can summarize 60,000 page books in a Cliff Note format in 2 pages?
Yes.
I mean, so if that's what's happening, like, something's off. I also, in all fairness, I did want to make it super simple and super easy to understand, mainly because really my psychology background comes into play in that if you have to use motivation to get someone to do something, whether that's read a book, follow you, or whatever, that will not generally elicit a long performing behavior or habit. You actually have to make it easy to do. Mm-hmm. And then you don't need as much motivation. So ease of use always trumps any sort of motivation, because as soon as motivation falls, there's this sort of fake curve, if you're listening, that happens on an XY in the XY axis. And as soon as motivation falls, you don't get the behavior. So you've got everything that I do in life really comes from that chart as it relates to business, whether that's onboarding a new customer, explaining things, is you absolutely have to make it easy. Then, so that's what's sort of my driving force. I actually studied, and this may be a large aspiration, but if you look at books that have sold over 1 million copies, they are actually very short. Who stole my cheese?
Yes. Yeah.
I keep going down the, Ken Blanchard's, I could keep going down the list.
Yeah.
But they are short. They are not long books. I'm talking about in general, like the business books. If you go into fiction and you're going to do Harry Potter and stuff, that's a different,
right.
It's a different genre. So, but the ones that sell 1 million copies in sort of the business, leadership, self-help places are all short.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
As a leader, you're responsible for the mission and the people assigned to you. Regardless of the size of your team, employees are depending on you for their lives and careers. For the sake of your team and the people who entrust you with this role, you need to master the skills to become a great leader. Best-selling leadership author John Rennie is proud to introduce the Qualified Leadership Book Series. This new series teaches you how to become a people-centered leader. Great leaders know that employees who are respected, appreciated, and allowed to grow will go the extra mile. These books provide real-world leadership wisdom written from a hands-on perspective. If you want to be a more effective leader, this is the one book series you should read this year. This 3-book series contains the following best-selling leadership books: I Have the Watch, You Have the Watch, and All in the Same Boat for one low price of $39.99. Begin your journey to become a leader worth following. Go to johnsrennie.com and get your order in today.
This episode is brought to you by Leader Connect, a leadership training company and video platform founded by the leadership book author and Deep Leadership Podcast guest, Neil Jerd. Leader Connect is a video and podcast streaming platform for leaders and teams. Watch it alone or as a team, and each video supports you and your team, allowing you to improve performance and build a great culture. Join hundreds of experts and learn about leadership, planning, public speaking, team building, mindfulness, and a range of other subjects that will help you lead well and build a great team. I'm proud to say that I'm one of the experts on this platform. Leader Connect is offering a 10% discount to all Deep Leadership listeners. Go to leader-connect.co.uk and enter the code DEEP at checkout. Master your leadership with Leader Connect.
This episode is brought to you by Ignite Management Services. Ignite is led by Mike Watson, who you might remember from episode 137. Mike and his team believe that everything starts with leadership. Whether it's strategy execution or cultural transformation, it's the role of the leader to create the conditions for their people to succeed. The team at Ignite can help you develop critical habits to enhance your leadership capability and transform your business. Ignite Management is now offering the Resilient Leadership Assessment Tool. This is an online questionnaire designed to assess and guide leadership development, coaching, and team building. It provides leaders an opportunity to gain insights into their leadership strengths and development needs. After taking this assessment, you will receive a custom, detailed report that provides practical and actionable recommendations to enhance your effectiveness. I have taken this assessment myself and found it to be extremely valuable in helping me make changes to my leadership approach. Right now, Ignite is offering 15% off the price of this tool to the Deep Leadership audience. Go to ignitemanagement.ca and enter the code START15 at checkout to get started today. Yeah, for me at least, I learned that lesson, and next any other future books I write will be very focused, very short, to the point, and then teach a particular skill, lesson, whatever, but then get out, get in, get out. So that's what I like about what this book is about. How can people get the most out of this particular book, though? I know you've got workbooks that are associated with it. Explain how the way to get the best out of this particular book.
Well, I think the best way is in the book, I put workspace. So it is as much of a book as it is a workbook to be able to do it. And I think you read and make notes as you go and not read. I mean, you could read it through and come back, certainly, and do that. But it's designed that you get to the end of the chapter. Chapter's really not that long, and you can start putting down your notes. So I think that's really how to do it. And the main thing is that just get started. Right? Too many times, I don't know about you, John, but as an entrepreneur, I've always got air quotes for those not watching, good ideas, and you're always like, oh, I could do this, or I could add this feature, or I could add that feature. I'm a software guy, or for you, it might be another product line. Oh, well, we could expand, or this, that, and the other, and sometimes just coming back and outlining that can help you sort of get some clarity. But main thing is just get started. Like, just start writing some things down. And that's how I designed the book in that way to really get things into action, because you will, as a person who has an idea that you may have been thinking about or want to do, you will become a self-licking ice cream cone very quickly. And you will convince yourself of a lot of things. But the way the book's designed is, it's going to ask you at the end of the chapter, like, okay, what's your thing, right? Yeah. Like at the end of the elevator pitch, what is your elevator pitch? And I've come up with these templates that get the person started without having to imagine or think about it.
I love that. I think we all need a little help. So templates can certainly be helpful, because I think we do get into this when we're writing, like you said, a self-licking ice cream cone. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, you breathe your own fumes. You're like, this is a great idea. It's gonna go places, right? But I think you need to vet it out with these tools and look at it and ask yourself the hard questions. And then again, I think like you said, be able to pitch it. Can you give me 4 words or 12 words to describe what you're trying to do? It doesn't make sense. So having templates like that is certainly helpful because I think when we're working on this stuff, when you have a blank sheet of paper, sometimes it's hard. If you have a little bit of like a Mad Lib, we have like fill in the blanks. It makes it a lot easier to at least just get started. Say, well, does that sound right? Or does that make sense? No, maybe change a word or two, but at least having a place to start is a good way to go. I was looking at the way the book is laid out, and you talk about these 11 slides, but they're really they're actually the chapters in the book as well, too, which corresponds to it. Could you just tell us, give us some examples of what's in some of these 11 slides? You don't have to go through all of them, but maybe an example of what some of the slides are. You mentioned financials being one of them.
Yeah, I'll touch on financials maybe in a minute, but maybe I use the problem slide. First is your elevator pitch. So you got to have your first slide is an elevator pitch. And you've got to come up with a good elevator pitch, and a good elevator pitch is really hard. An example, and I have a template on how to go through that, but the example of a really good elevator pitch would be, we fix bad haircuts, or we help you find files you have but can't find faster. So you got to be able to get there. And then in a problem slide, a template is a person does something, their pain is, and existing solutions are broken because. It's really that simple, right? Like, I don't care. You and I could put every business through that template, and you should be able to boil that down. So, and then it goes on to solution and market. And I think one thing I'll say real quick, and I'll touch on the financials, is this book, as much as it's designed for you to get your ideas down, it's designed to help you not make the mistakes. Meaning, when you're in your market slide, a lot of people tend to, and even like super educated, I get pitched a lot. And you'll see it. Well, we're going to get, I saw one today. Well, we're going to get 3% of this market. Like, that's not a market opportunity slide. It may equate to 3%, but you need to start from the bottom up, not the top down. So just eliminating mistakes that will get you into a bad place, because if you don't build your market opportunity slide from the ground up, then you don't understand your go-to-market slide, which is the next one, which you're going to have to come back around anyway, right? Your go-to-market is how are you going to go to market from like 0.0 or 0.1. So, and then in the financials, I think a lot of people, unless you're a financial person who loves spreadsheets, you avoid that, right? Humans avoid pain. And I just walk people through in that financial slide, fill in the blank, and make them think about things that they sometimes don't think about. Now, you've been an operator, maybe some people who are listening to this are experienced, but some people who are new might not realize that if you allocate $125,000 salary to someone, you'll see a lot of those people put $125,000 divided by 12 and put that in their cash flow or P&L, in their P&L statement. But what they didn't realize is they need to add like 17% onto that for the taxes you're going to pay, the 401k you're going to pay for that person, and insurance and things like that. So I just try to point out those things and have fill in the blanks so someone can start to really think about, what that looks like.
Interesting. I don't know if you're the expert here. You probably yell at me for this, but I always tell people when they're doing a business plan it's going to take twice as much cash and twice as much time than you think. Does that make sense, or is that just my experience?
I think it's going to take longer than that, but
okay. Because that was my experience, because I was like, oh, we got this. I was I was in this industry for years, for decades. So I knew what the market was, what the opportunity was. I knew, but once I slapped a new logo on my T-shirt, things changed. You're like, oh, who are you again? I'm like, I was just here selling you with another company. Like, well, but I've never heard of this company before, right? And so when you start something new, there is it depends on the industry, obviously, but there is some element of like, I've never heard of you before. They don't want to be the first to buy your product, right? They'll wait till a few more people buy, and then they'll so there's this adoption curve that I don't think many entrepreneurs think about. They think, oh, I got the greatest, mousetrap, and it'll sell like nothing, And the truth of the matter is, it takes a while to get up that adoption curve. And even if you are experienced and your customers know you and trust you already, you put on a different T-shirt and it's like, who are what's this company? And that was my experience. So you're saying it could even be more than double.
I'd say that if I think and you probably hear this, the common dialogue is, we'll have 1 year's worth of money in the bank if you're going to quit your day job. I think you should have at least 2. And most people are now wincing who are listening to your show, thinking, well, that feels like a lot, which it probably is. And my next piece of advice is, and start it as a side hustle. I mean, I can't tell you how many businesses, and that should not take away from your day job. But right. You can start almost anything as a side hustle. And if you really unpack a lot of the businesses that did start, that are well-known brands, some of them started as side hustles, and even some that you haven't heard about that have been, really successful. You can do that. And what you do is you sort of de-risk it, because you get your plan and then you get into the market. And then what I think that first wave, when you hit the market, like you're saying, you showed up with a new T-shirt, like that's sort of like just running into this wave that you'll get through it, but you're going to get through it slower. So if you can do that and still bide yourself time, because, you can't, I said something, the market doesn't care about how much money you have or whatever. The market just doesn't care. The market is the market. So you're going to have to take a few of these blows. And if you can minimize your burn rate along the way, then you're going to buy yourself a longer time. And the longer you're in the game, the more likely you will be able to win the game.
That right there is a clip. Clip that one right there, people. You need to understand that the longer you're in it, the more likely you're going to be successful. So, and how do you do that? You want to make that run, like we call it a runway. You want that runway as long as possible. So again, if you can do it as a side hustle, get some, validate your ideas through, the way you validate ideas is through sales. With people, people will, if the dogs like the dog food, they're going to eat the dog food. So if the customers buy the product, that you've got something going on there, but don't go, so if you can do it as a side hustle and get some of that learning in before you start pitching the big idea. And the other thing too, is when you pitch your idea and you say, oh yeah, we've already sold, 100,000 of these widgets. Like, wait, what? You're talking to an investor and they say, oh, so the risk that you said, you de-risk it for the investor. They're like, oh, okay. Well, so you've already proven this works. And so that's it. That is a good plus if you can do that.
And or your partner, who I think is like always your number one person, whoever your significant other is. Like, my wife we've been together since we started the first company together, but there's always that part where you're like, hey, I want to do this. And you're always going to have to de-risk it for that person. And de-risk it for yourself. That's the important part, because then at least you're not burning bridges, and, you can make some adjustments without, I think when you have a very big decision to make with huge consequences, it can skew your opportunity moving forward. Whereas if you just minimize that because you still kept your day job, and, eventually you're going to know when to switch. You're going to know when to switch because you're like walking around like a zombie because you're selling so much of your stuff, or, your product's taken off that you can't do two things. And then the market tells you. You don't have to decide when to quit. The market tells you when to quit.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And some people, they want a business just so they can get out of their existing job, right? But if you just jump into if you jump into something that isn't proven, then you really put yourself at a risk, right? Your own personal risk, right? So I always say, if you've got a good job with benefits and maybe you're not passionate about it, but you're passionate about something else, well, build it on the side, and see if it'll grow and see if it's something that you can make a living doing, If you do that, that's great. That's fantastic.
And if you do quit your day job, because I did have someone quit their day job and they were doing a game. I won't go into detail so I don't expose anybody, but I said, "You quit your day job?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Do you know how many widgets you have to sell?" I think his product was like $29.95. I was like, "Do you know how many of those you have to sell to even break even with your current salary? Like, did you?" And then I saw this look of panic, right? Because I did the math in my head very quickly. I'm like, you just don't go from this to that overnight. I'm sorry. I mean, even your Facebook or Instagram ad isn't going to convert where your customer acquisition costs that fast. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. So I'm not being negative. And I am positive. I think it can happen and it will happen. But, better to go in with some caution and a plan that I think it's also easier to change an existing plan than it is to react to a change when you had no plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, to adjust based on the conditions on the ground, based on what the customer's like, what the competitor reaction has been. Yeah, absolutely. You want to be able to have something that you can adjust based on the performance of the business. This is working, this isn't working. And make those adjustments. But if you're doing this on the fly, you're going to be in trouble pretty quick. You're going to run out of money quick. I know that for a fact.
You will do that. That was my first startup I ever did. Lawyer, name was Harry Glazier. He was in Northern Virginia, worked for Greenberg Tri-Rig. And it was my first startup. And I really didn't know what I was doing. And I knew what I was building. I mean, I built a social network and I knew that market and I knew phishing and blah, blah, blah. And the internet was young. But he's like, "Kid, one piece of advice I'll give you. Out of everything, just don't run out of money." Run out of money, you run out of time. You run out of time, you don't get the opportunity.
And such powerful words. I can't even add anything to that because I know that for a fact. So that's interesting. Brandon, what final message would you like to leave with our listeners about this subject?
I think you can do it. Like whether you're an existing company and you have an idea to spin out a product or a service, or you're someone who's out there and you're listening to this and you have an idea that you've thought about a long time, like build a business plan very quickly and then get into the market and start testing it. And that's the market's going to tell you whether it's good or bad. And my main thing is just like get into the market, because otherwise you will be a self-licking ice cream cone and years will go by and you will have never gotten your product in the market. And, sometimes you'll be surprised at how good it can be. And you know what? If it's not good, that's actually good, because you just saved yourself a lot of time and a lot of money to move on to whatever that adjustment is, or possibly new idea that was better than your first one.
Absolutely. That minimum viable product or service, get it out there, see what happens, right? So you can make those adjustments. And if it fails, like you said, you have a data point. Boom. Customers don't eat it. They don't want it. What do I need to do differently? Yeah, I love that advice. So powerful, so important. Listeners, if you hear that, you're thinking about, I've got an idea, I want to spin something off, maybe start something new. It's really powerful advice that Brandon's putting out there. How can our listeners find out more about you? All your podcasts, by the way, we didn't even talk about it. You got a ton of podcasts out there and this new book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I only have a ton of podcasts, John, because I'm experimenting to figure out what actually will work.
I love it.
It turns out that when you do that, you might get a breakout podcast, which I might be onto. So I have a bunch of podcasts. I have the book. The best place is just to, if you're interested in the book, you can find it on Amazon by just searching Business Plan, Brandon White. And the best place to see all the stuff that I do is just go to my personal website, which is brandoncwhite.com. deepleadership.com.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great website. I've been all over it. And Brandon does have a bunch of podcasts. And we were talking before we started the show, like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And he says, I do it because I systemize everything and I've got processes to do things. And again, if you're going to do anything in life, make processes, make it simple for yourself, make it systematic. We do that here on the Deep Leadership Podcast. We try to make it easy. We try to get as many guests on here as we can. But I also run a company during the day. So I've got to make it simple. I got to make processes so we can make this work. But again, I highly encourage you to check out this book. It's Back of the Napkin to Business Plan in 11 Slides. Such a great idea, great concept for a book. And again, if you're looking for something that's a practical guide to get you to a real business plan that's going to get you real results, this is the kind of book you need. I highly encourage you to follow the link that I have here in the show notes. Check out this book. Also go to Brandon's website because you're going to get a lot of good information there. And you might find a podcast that you like almost as much as Deep Leadership. So I highly encourage you to check that out as well. Brandon, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing this book and the advice you gave us about getting started with a new business venture. So thanks for coming on the show and sharing all that.
John, thanks for having me on. I'm really grateful for it.
Well, thanks again. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Today is working for me. Do you believe that for yourself? Hey, I'm Pastor Julie, and I want to empower you through encouragement, inviting you to my podcast, Big Truth Encouragement, where I unpack living a faith-filled life. I created my podcast for the ladies, but gentlemen, you'll gain something too. So I invite you to listen to Big Truth Encouragement on Electricast and any platform where you listen to your podcast.
Electricast. Have you ever wondered what actually happens in Congress every day? Stay informed on Capitol Hill's daily happenings with a concise, factual summary of the Senate and House of Representatives' activities from the previous session, free from bias, on the Congressional Record Daily Digest podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and discover the process from the heart of U.S. politics. The Congressional Record Daily Digest, an Electricast production.
Electricast.